is Ruel's Running Podcast, a podcast about running, health, family, play, and an NSNG lifestyle. And now, here's your host, Ruel.
Excuse me as I rock on. That's Went Away by Dorothy Lane. Dorothy Lane out of Martinez, California. That's out of the Cut and Dry album. Check them out at dorothylanemusic.com. Yeah. Hey everybody, welcome to Ruel's Running Podcast. I am your host, Ruel Abadan. If you are a return listener, welcome back, guys. And if you are a new listener, welcome to the show. Just an update. And for those who have been listening for a while, you guys will understand. I've been really seriously thinking about changing. I've been thinking about changing the name of the podcast. I'm like, maybe 80% I should change the name of the podcast because running is deceptive. And I know I say, you don't have to put one foot in front of the other. At least I used to say in the beginning of the podcast. It's not about putting one foot in front of the other, right? It's not just putting one foot in front of the other. It's all just running things, today, your whatever, right? And so, and yes, I do talk about running time to time. I, try to provide some insight on my running and try to solicit, everyone else's feedback on their running. If anybody has any questions related to running, how they can get into it and, and whatnot, I try to socialize that way. But, these days, the majority of the podcast, as you know, has little to do with the activity of running. So I just thought that maybe if I change the name to exclude running in the title but still, sort of subtitle that I talk about running or, have running topics and other random topics that generally happens these days. So, my thought is I would just call it the Ruel Abadan Show or the Ruel Abadan Incident or something along those lines. I don't want to use experience because Joe Rogan uses experience. So I'm looking for alternatives. There's the basic show, but I don't know how much of this is really a show. So yeah. That's where I'm at. And then the 20% that thinks that I shouldn't change it is sort of leaving it open for feedback. I need to know if you guys care about are you guys holding on to in any way that this thing is called what it is, Ruel's Running. Obviously, if I did change the name, the website Ruel's Running doesn't make any sense. I'd have to come up with a different thing. I would end up holding on to Ruel's Running, and maybe one day I'll resurrect the use of Ruel's Running. I don't know, and I don't want to. The other option is to shut this thing down, build up towards sunsetting this thing and encouraging folks to roll over to whatever the next thing is. But no, that's just like splitting folks. I'll just kind of, want to keep things where it's at. And then I know that's just me thinking out loud, talking out loud. And the other thing is, I'm having this conversation with you right now as I test out recording the podcast on the cloud, because I need to use this way of recording when I do have others on the podcast, not just this podcast, but all the other podcasts that I'm working on. At this point in time, the other podcast is Service Guys podcast. So I am a co-host and or producer of Service Guys podcast, and the other co-host is your friend and mine, and also the service expert Lonnie Beecham. So when you guys hear this, go to your podcast player and look for Service Guys podcast. And on Apple Podcasts, be sure to listen, rate it, and subscribe, because it's still early on in the beginnings of the podcast. So, your support will can help. Let's put it that way. And then find that podcast, follow that podcast also on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Okay, thank you. There's another podcast that hasn't released, still being developed, and it'll be more run specific. At least the lineup will be more in the running community, and that one, I don't remember if I mentioned what that'll be yet, but it's okay. I know Vinny's talked about it on his podcast, like really early on when I brought up the idea to him, just sort of to get his support. And then next thing you know, he starts, talking about it on his podcast. And I was like, oh, wow, just wasn't ready for that, but I did appreciate it. But yeah, just things take time, So far, got Service Guys podcast out, and before the end of the year, sooner. I mean, there's a lot of time between now and the end of the year. Get the other podcast out. So, I'll keep you all posted. So that's all like podcast related stuff. Whether or not I should change the name of this thing, I think it'd be fun. For those who know me personally, you know that I do things in a way that is never one way, and I think that's sort of like the blessing and the curse of someone who's can be labeled as creative. I do operate abadamstudios.com, where I'll do the graphic design stuff and the web design stuff. So I work on something, whether it's on audio, whether it's on video, whether it's on digital design, I'll be happy with it to a point, and release it, but, never 100% happy, and which is fine. I've done designs for a lot of folks and never quite settled, even though I may be settled with a design on that given day. The next week I could look at it and say, I could have done it differently, but that's just the way it is in this realm. So, I don't know where I was going with that, and it definitely has nothing to do with running. And another reason why I probably should change the name, but I don't know. We'll see. We shall see. That creative side is okay with if it happens, because it just means I get to tinker around and get creative with something else, a different name, a different logo, a different way of talking about things. Who knows? But yeah, that's that. And while I'm here, I will shut this segment of the recording off, ensure that the recording is good, and then pick up with the rest of the podcast. Awesome. Thank you.
Hey guys, how's it going? So, I want to share something with you guys. A few months back, a guy by the name of Anthony Pooh, he reached out to me and says he's a fan of the podcast, and he's a fan of podcasts in general as well, as am I. But he and his company created the first device to play Spotify music on the run without an iPhone. So I was like, oh, that sounds cool. And it's a device called Mighty. And Wired, the magazine, referred to them as the iPod Shuffle for Spotify. And I took a look, and it looks pretty much like an iPod Shuffle, but I think it's better. I believe it's better. So a little bit about Mighty is they launched back in July 2017, and that was with their partnership with Spotify, and it's awesome. So what does it mean? It means, like an iPod Shuffle, you can go out on your runs listening to your audio, but this is a little bit different. It's a whole lot different. No more running or working out without your bulky smartphone in your hand and awkwardly on your arm if you're that type of runner. So you could kind of run free just using the Mighty, and also you reduce the amount of cracked screens, should you run with your phone and drop it. And as in addition, if you are one of those users of a smartphone or an iPhone who tend to get a bunch of notifications because of all the apps and text messages and whatnot, if you want to run without distraction, you don't have to worry about that with the Mighty. Now, the Mighty works with wired and Bluetooth headphones and speakers, so that's kind of cool. I like to use them with my AirPod, my Bluetooth-enabled earbuds from Apple. And let's see what else. They no signal, no problem. Content stored offline, right? Great for planes, subways, and remote areas. So yeah, once you've synced, because you're able to sync your Spotify playlists, and your playlist can be music and podcasts, and it's all on a device, and you don't have to worry about being connected to some sort of signal. It's super durable. It's drop and water resistant, so try doing that with your phone. No, don't do that with your phone. But yeah, I'm digging it. Anthony sent me a device. I said I'd have to spend time with it and learn it, and enough to be able to talk about it ideally in a favorable way. And I love it. I've shared it on social. I'm sharing it here on the podcast. And, you can, one way that you can find out more about it is, and also support this show, is to go to my partners page at ruelsrunning.com/partners. And there is a image of the Mighty, and you could, click on that and check it out. So yeah, it comes in 3 colors: white, orange, and black. I have the black, and I'm loading it up with podcasts, and I'm trying to learn some new music or get into some new music, so I gotta load some new music in there. I asked a coworker the other day, what her favorite hip-hop artist is at the moment, and she said Big Crit, and I'm like, I'm gonna have to find out more about Big Crit. And so I just started shuffling through Spotify, and trying to find out what I like and what I don't like, and put it on the Mighty and be on my way. So you can be Mighty too. Just check it out. I hope that helps, folks. Thanks.
Hey everybody, it's Ruel. Just wanted to share something with you. I thought it was awesome. The other day, I was in the city, being the city of San Francisco. It was the morning, and I went to get a coffee at a neighboring coffee establishment, which happened to be in the form of a truck. No, not a food truck, but a coffee truck. And it was a Phil's coffee truck. And there was a bunch of other folks already standing around waiting for their coffee to be fulfilled or created or made, mixed up, what have you, as was I. And after several minutes just waiting for my order, there's a sound of what seemed like metal shrapnel hitting the ground. And I look, and it turned out some guy, he ran up to the truck, shoved his hand into the tip jar, and grabbed a bunch of the cash and started to run. And he was kind of heavy, so I don't know how far he'd be able to make it, And quickly after, a woman dashed out of the truck and proceeded to chase after him. He got off the sidewalk onto the street, proceeded to run and cross the street as the Phil's Coffee woman chased him. And at a blink of an eye, all of the money was on the road, and a lot of the other patrons, like myself, who watched this quickly unfold, started to make their way to, gather up all of that cash on the street as the gal continued to chase the basically the douchebag lowlife. And she the chaser, I don't even know what to call her, but she made her way back to the truck, and everybody gathered the cash and gave it to her. And, for the most part, everything was gathered up and placed back in the tip jar. And she thanked everybody for picking up all of that cash. And, me and a bunch of others were impressed. And, it happened so fast that, I sort of regret that I didn't have a quick response to what had happened. I think if like a lot of others, if I wasn't checking my phone for messages and had seen it, a second sooner, I play scenarios in my head that I just stick my foot out and the guy would trip, or I would lend a hand and chase. There's always a good side to that because you feel good, but there's also a bad side because the worst, what if something happens, like the guy's out of his mind and he pulls a sharp object out and, nobody wants to get hurt. Fortunately, that wasn't the case. But, I was impressed, and it was like the best thing to see in the morning. Like, I didn't need a cup of coffee anymore. That was kind of exciting to see, some lowlife trying to steal some cash from a business, and someone chase after him, and then, I high-fived her, and I told her that, that she's my favorite, whatever that meant. But, for that morning, for that day, if I had to pick who my favorite was, she won the day for me. And I told her that, high-fived her, and she's like, she told me, like, have a great day, sir. She's just like it was every day for her, to chase bad guys. But I just wanted to share that, there's a lot of, people who are in need and end up doing bad stuff, or there's just people that do bad stuff. But there's also people that do good, from the person who tries to, apprehend or chase down the bad person. There's people who are around who support what's going on and lend a hand and pick up all of that cash and put it back. So yeah, just want to share that. I think it was awesome.
Thanks for listening to Ruel's Running Podcast with Ruel. If you like what you just heard, share it with your friends and your enemies. Also, be sure to check out the site over at ruelsrunning.com. This has been another Coffee with Heavy Cream production. Join us next time for another silly show of Ruel's Running Podcast.